Life doesn't always make sense, does it? We face pain, loss, and moments that leave us asking, why is this happening? If you've ever felt the weight of those questions, you're not alone. Join me on Lenses of Love as we uncover hope and meaning in the midst of life's toughest moments. Because even in the darkest times, God is with you. Have you ever had one of those moments where everything seems to fall apart all at once? Maybe it was a phone call that turned your world upside down. Or maybe it was an ordinary day that became unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. Whatever it was, I think we've all stood in the aftermath of something painful, wondering why? Why did this have to happen? I once heard about a young family who had just moved into their dream home. It was everything they had hoped for, a cozy place where they planned to make memories and raise their children. But only weeks after they moved in, a fire swept through their neighborhood. Their house was destroyed, and with it, nearly everything they owned was also destroyed. Thankfully, the family was safe, but in the days that followed, they couldn't help but wrestle with that one heartbreaking question: why would this happen? It's a question we all ask ourselves at some point. Maybe you've asked it while sitting in the hospital room, or after the loss of someone you love, or when you were blindsided by betrayal or disappointment. When bad things happen, it's natural to wonder if there's a reason or if it's all just some random chaos. And if we're honest, the answers don't always come easily. The question of why bad things happen is as old as humanity itself. It's not just a philosophical debate, it's deeply personal. When you're in the middle of pain, it can feel like the world is spinning out of control and you're left alone in the wreckage. I think we often look at life like it's a movie we're watching for the first time. We only see the scene we're in, and when it's painful, it's hard to imagine how things could ever turn around. But what if there's a bigger picture? What if what looks like a mess right now is part of a story that's still being written? I know that's hard to believe when you're in the middle of it. When life feels like it's crumbling around you, the idea of hope can feel like a distant dream. But one of the things I've learned is that even in the hardest seasons, there's more going on than what we see. Think of some of the hardest moments in your own life. Maybe you're in one of those moments right now. Or maybe you've come out of the other side of a tough season and can look back with a little bit more perspective. Either way, there's something we all crave in those moments: meaning. We want to know that the pain isn't pointless, that it's not just random, that somehow in some way it matters. The truth is, bad things happen. That's a part of living in a broken world. But pain doesn't mean the absence of purpose. In fact, some of the most powerful stories of redemption and transformation come from seasons of struggle. Today, we're going to explore what it means to find hope and purpose in the midst of life's hardest seasons. We're going to wrestle with the question of why bad things happen and uncover how those moments of brokenness can become opportunities for growth, redemption, and even joy. But before we do, we'll take a short break. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, good to see you today here at the Lenses of Love set. I love to watch Sam's message and learn from him how to see God and His Word through the lenses of love. Perhaps you would like to learn more about other questions of life. For example, why am I here? Is there a God? Why is there so much evil and suffering? And why are there so many different religions, and which one is true? Is the Bible fact or fiction? Who is Jesus of Nazareth? Was he truly God as Christians say he is? Why did Jesus come to earth to die? And how does his death offer us salvation? What happens when I die? Is there really a heaven or a hell? These questions and others we answer on our online Bible study platform at hopestudy.ca. There, you will find answers to these and other crucial life questions. We would love to hear from you. Please email us at hopestudy@hopetv.ca. And remember, there is hope and answers to life's biggest questions in the Word of God.
When bad things happen, one of the first questions we often ask is this: did God cause it? It's a natural reaction. After all, if God is all-powerful, why doesn't he stop bad things from happening? Why does he allow pain, suffering, and brokenness in our world? To wrestle with these questions, we need to start with a foundational truth. God is not the author of evil. Pain, suffering, and injustice were never part of his original plan for us. Think about the very beginning of the story in Genesis. When God created the world, he declared it very good. There was no pain, no suffering, no death, only harmony, beauty, and life. But when sin entered the world through humanity's choice to turn away from God, everything changed. That decision brought brokenness into a world that was meant to flourish. It's important to understand that the pain we experience isn't a reflection of God's character, but a consequence of humanity's free will. God gave us the ability to choose, to love, to follow him, and to live in relationship with him. But with that choice came the possibility of turning away from him. Now, I know what you might be thinking. If God knew sin would lead to so much suffering, why did he give us free will at all? That's a fair question, but think about it this way. Without free will, love wouldn't really be love. Forced love isn't love at all, it's compliance. God didn't want robots who would automatically follow him. He wanted a relationship with us built on trust and genuine love. But with that freedom came the potential for sin, and with sin came brokenness. We live in a world that bears the scars of that brokenness. Natural disasters, illnesses, and even the pain we inflict on each other they're all symptoms of a creation that is groaning under the weight of sin. Yet, even in the midst of this brokenness, God is not distant or uninvolved. He doesn't sit back and watch from a distance as we struggle. Instead, he enters into our pain with us. Think about Jesus for a second. When God came to earth in the form of Christ, he didn't avoid suffering. He experienced it firsthand. He felt hunger, thirst, exhaustion, betrayal, and even death. On the cross, he bore the weight of the world's brokenness. If you've ever doubted whether God cares about your pain, look to the cross. It's the ultimate proof that he doesn't just see your pain, he's with you in it. But even as we acknowledge that God is not the cause of suffering, we have to wrestle with another question. Why doesn't he stop it? This is where we come face to face with the mystery of God's sovereignty. While God doesn't cause bad things to happen, he allows them for reasons that are often beyond our understanding. Sometimes he allows suffering to teach us, to refine us, or to draw us closer to him. Other times, the purpose remains a mystery. But here's what we can hold on to. Even when we don't understand the why, we can trust the who. God's character is unchanging. He's good, loving, and faithful. And while we may not always be able to see the full picture, we can trust that he is working behind the scenes, even in the midst of pain. Look at it this way. Imagine standing inches away from a massive painting. All you can see are random brushstrokes, some dark and chaotic, others light and beautiful. Up close, it looks like a mess. But when you step back, you begin to see how those brushstrokes come together to form a masterpiece. That's often how life feels. When we're in the middle of pain, all we see are dark, brushstrokes, the confusion, the heartbreak, the loss, but God sees the bigger picture. He sees how each moment, even the painful ones, fit into a greater story of redemption. This doesn't mean the pain itself is good or that we have to be okay with it. Pain is real and it hurts, but it does mean that pain doesn't get the final word. As we continue, I want you to hold on to this truth. God is not the author of evil. He's the author of redemption. And even in a world broken by sin, He is working to bring beauty out of the mess. But if God isn't the author of suffering, where is He when bad things happen? How can we trust that He's working in the midst of our pain? After the break, we'll explore how God brings purpose and hope even in life's darkest moments. Stay with us.
Hello friends, it is great to be here with you on Lenses of Love today. I trust that you've been blessed by this program, and I hope that you're able to share it with your loved ones. Thank you for your support so far. It means the world to us, really. And if you want to help us, if you haven't already partnered with us as an agent of hope, I briefly wanted to share with you how to do so. Above all, we desire your prayers. Please remember those who are involved with Hope Channel Canada and the production of its programs, as well as the different initiatives that we'll be launching throughout the country. I also ask your prayers for the hearts of people all across Canada, that they will be open to learning that in Jesus there is more to life. Anytime you have to spare in order to volunteer with one of our projects will be greatly appreciated. Please feel free to contact us at either agentsofhope@hopetv.ca or visit agentsofhope.ca to have your questions answered and to learn where you can be of service. And finally, your financial support would be greatly appreciated, and any amount makes a huge difference in impacting Canadians all across our nation. Please visit agentsofhope.ca so that you can donate online via debit, credit, Google Pay, or Apple Pay to make a one-time or recurring donation. If you prefer to donate offline, you can e-transfer us at agentsofhope@hopetv.ca or mail a check to Hope Channel Canada at the following address: Hope Channel Canada, 1148 King Street East, Oshawa, Ontario, L1H1H8. Thank you once again for joining us on this exciting journey.
If God isn't the author of suffering, then where is He when bad things happen? That's a question we've all wrestled with at some point. When life feels chaotic or broken, it's natural to wonder if God is really present, and if He is, what He's doing about it. Here's the truth. While God doesn't cause pain, He doesn't waste it either. He works through it, bringing purpose out of what feels pointless and redemption out of what seems ruined. One of the most powerful examples of this in the Bible is the story of Joseph. Joseph was the favorite son of his father, Jacob, and his brothers hated him for it. Their jealousy drove them to sell him into slavery, and he ended up in Egypt, far from home, betrayed by his own family. That wasn't the end of Joseph's struggles. After rising to a position of responsibility in the house of an Egyptian official, Joseph was falsely accused of a crime and thrown into prison. By all appearances, his life was a series of tragedies, each one more unfair than the last. If anyone had a reason to ask, why do bad things happen? It was Joseph. But here's where the story takes a turn. While Joseph was in prison, God was working behind the scenes. Through a series of events that only God could orchestrate, Joseph was eventually brought before Pharaoh to interpret his dreams. Pharaoh was so impressed that he made Joseph second in command over all of Egypt. Years later, during a severe famine, Joseph's brothers came to Egypt seeking food. They didn't recognize Joseph at first, but when they did, they were terrified, expecting him to seek revenge. Instead, Joseph said something remarkable. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people." I love Joseph's story because it's a powerful reminder that even in the midst of pain and injustice, God is at work. What others intended for harm, God used for good. Now, when we're in the middle of our own struggles, it doesn't always feel like God is working. It's hard to see his hand when the pain is fresh and the questions are unanswered. But just because we don't see it doesn't mean he's absent. Think about it like planting a seed. When you bury a seed in the soil, nothing happens right away. The ground looks the same, bare, unremarkable, but beneath the surface, something is happening. The seed is growing roots, breaking through the shell and preparing to sprout. It takes time, but eventually that seed pushes through the dirt and grows into something beautiful. Our pain can feel like that buried seed. In the moment, it seems like nothing is happening, but beneath the surface, God is at work, using our struggles to shape us, to grow us, and to bring something beautiful out of what feels broken. This doesn't mean we have to pretend the pain doesn't hurt, or that we have to like it. Even Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, cried out to God, asking if there was another way. In the same breath, he surrendered, saying, "Not my will, but yours be done." Surrendering our pain to God doesn't erase it, but it allows him to bring purpose out of it. It's trusting that even when we don't understand, he's working for our good. The same God who worked in Joseph's life, who brought beauty out of the ashes in his life, is the same God working in your life. He sees your pain and he's not indifferent to it. He's working through it even when it feels like nothing is happening. You might be in a season where it feels like the seed is still buried, where the darkness feels overwhelming. But hold on to this truth: God is not done, and the story isn't over. And in his hands, even the hardest chapters of our lives can be redeemed. We've explored how pain and suffering are part of the brokenness of our world, not authored by God, but allowed for reasons often beyond our understanding. We've seen how God works through our pain, just as he did in Joseph's life, weaving even the darkest moments into something beautiful. But there's another dimension to suffering that we need to explore: the kind of surrender and trust that leads us to hope. And for that, let's go back to the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus' prayer in the garden is one of the most vulnerable and powerful moments in Scripture. It's the night before his crucifixion. The Last Supper has ended, and Jesus, fully aware of what's about to happen, goes away to Gethsemane with his disciples. He knows the betrayal, the physical agony, and the weight of the world's sin are just hours away. Matthew 26, verses 36 to 39 says, "Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said, 'Sit here while I go over there to pray.' He took Peter and Zebedee's two sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, 'My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me.' He went on a little farther and bowed with his face to the ground, praying, 'My Father, if it's possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine.'" This moment reveals so much about Jesus and how we can approach our own suffering. First, Jesus shows us that it's okay to feel overwhelmed. He didn't pretend everything was fine. He didn't suppress his emotions or try to push through on his own. He was honest about his anguish, saying, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death." How often do we try to hide our pain, We tell ourselves we need to be strong, that we can't let others see us struggle. But Jesus, the Son of God, shows us that vulnerability is not weakness, it's a part of being human. And when we bring our raw emotions to God, we invite Him into the depths of our pain. Second, Jesus teaches us that it's okay to wrestle with God's plan. His prayer is so relatable. He says, if it's possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. How many times have we prayed something similar? God, please take this away. I don't want to go through this. Isn't there another way? Jesus' honesty with his Father shows us that it's okay to ask hard questions. It's okay to hope for a different path. God isn't intimidated by our struggles or offended by our doubts. He invites us to bring all of it to Him. But here's where the story shifts. After asking for the cup to be taken away, Jesus says, "Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." This is the heart of trust, surrendering our will to God's, even when we don't fully understand His plan. In this moment, Jesus wasn't just surrendering to the pain of the cross, He was surrendering to the purpose behind it, the salvation of humanity. He trusted that His suffering had meaning, even though it came at an unimaginable cost. This kind of trust isn't easy. It requires us to let go of control, to release our grip on what we think our lives should look like. But it's in that surrender that we find peace. When you're in your Gethsemane moment, facing something you don't want to endure, remember Jesus' example. It's okay to feel the weight of it. It's okay to wrestle with it. But ultimately, trust that God's will is good, even when it's hard to see. Another powerful aspect of this story is that Jesus wasn't alone. He brought Peter, James, and John with Him. Even though they fell asleep, their presence mattered. It reminds us that we're not meant to face our struggles in isolation. We need community. We need people who will sit with us, people who pray with us, and remind us of God's promises. Finally, the Garden of Gethsemane teaches us that suffering isn't the end of the story. The cross was painful, but it wasn't the conclusion. It led to the resurrection, a moment of victory, hope, and redemption. In the same way, your suffering isn't the end of your story. God is working in ways you can't yet see. He's using your pain to shape you, to grow you, and to prepare you for something greater. So what does this mean for you today? It means that when life feels overwhelming, you can bring your raw, unfiltered emotions to God. It means you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to trust the one who does. And it means that no matter what you're going through, your story isn't over. Jesus' prayer in the garden wasn't just a moment of anguish. It was a moment of trust and surrender. And because of His trust, we have hope. Hope that our suffering isn't meaningless. Hope that God is with us in the midst of it. And hope that, like the resurrection, our hardest moments can lead to something beautiful. So why do bad things happen? It's a question that lingers in the corners of our minds, especially in the moments when life feels overwhelming and unfair. After everything we've explored together today, even though we barely scratched the surface, I hope you see that while we may not always have the answers, we can have hope. Hope isn't about denying the pain or pretending everything is okay. It's about trusting that God is present, working, and weaving purpose into every moment, even the hardest ones. It's about seeing our struggles through the lenses of love and understanding that the story isn't over. So where does that leave us? How do we take what we've learned and apply it to our own lives? First, we need to remember that we're not alone. One of the most comforting truths in the Bible is that God is with us. He was with Joseph in the pit, and He was with Jesus in the garden, and He's with you right now in whatever you're facing. When life feels overwhelming, it's easy to believe the lie that we're on our own. But the reality is that God never leaves us. Psalms 34:18 reminds us, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed." No matter how alone you feel, God is right there walking with you through the storm. Second, we need to trust that God is working, even when we can't see it. One of the hardest parts of suffering is the waiting. When we're in the middle of the pain, it feels like nothing is happening, like God is silent. But Joseph's story reminds us that God is always working, even behind the scenes. Think about the moments in your own life when things seemed hopeless, but later you could look back and see how God was moving. Maybe it was a closed door that led to a better opportunity. Maybe it was a relationship that ended only to make room for something healthier. Or maybe it was a season of waiting that taught you patience and trust. Whatever it is, those moments remind us that God's timing is perfect. He sees the bigger picture even when we can't. Thirdly, we need to surrender our need for control. This is the hardest one, isn't it? We'd like to think we're in control, that if we plan enough or work hard enough, we can make life go the way we want. But the truth is, control is an illusion. Jesus in the garden shows us what true surrender looks like. He didn't want to face the cross. He was honest about that. But he trusted the Father's plan. And because of that trust, the world changed forever. Surrender doesn't mean giving up, it means giving over, handing our plans, our pain, and our uncertainties to God, and trusting that He knows what's best. Fourth, we need to hold on to hope. Hope is what allows us to keep going, even when life feels heavy. It's the belief that our pain isn't meaningless, that God is working all things together for good. It's the confidence that the story doesn't end in the garden or at the cross, but in the resurrection. When we look at our lives through the lenses of love, we begin to see glimpses of that hope. We see that our suffering isn't the final chapter. We see that God's love is bigger than our pain. We can see that His plans are greater than anything we could imagine. So what does this look like in your life? Maybe you're in a season of grief, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again. Maybe you're facing uncertainty about your future, feeling like the path ahead is unclear. Or maybe you're carrying a burden that feels too heavy to bear. Wherever you are, know this: you are not forgotten. Your pain is not meaningless, and your story is far from over. God is working with you. He's with you in ways you can't see yet. He's inviting you to trust Him even in the hardest moments. As we close, I want to leave you with this. Life is hard, but God is good. Suffering is real, but so is hope. And through it all, you are seen, known, and deeply loved by the one who holds the whole world in His hands. So take a deep breath. Bring your questions, bring your pain and your uncertainty to God. Let Him meet you in the middle of it all. And as you trust Him, watch how He turns even the darkest moments into something beautiful. Until we meet again, remember this: you are loved, you are valued, and your life has purpose.